If you look at history, you look at any two sides from any war, they all had essentially the same artillery, had the same access as far as rations, soldiers, training. When one army ends up defeating another, oftentimes it is because of the leadership. It is not because of the firearm that they're holding or the food that is readily available to them. It is because they were motivated to move further when they became tired, to continue on when they were starving, and to continue fighting when they had no bullets left. Words have one pals. If you look at any team, any effective team, regardless of the sport, especially when it comes to teams in the higher ups or even college teams, both sides of those teams are equally athletic, equally well trained. The difference between the teams that win consistently is usually the coach, which oddly enough isn't throwing the ball, isn't physically doing anything on the field. It is the mentor, it is the coach. So essentially, it's the words that are essentially engaging the people themselves. It is communication that is winning. And on your daily life, active communication is absolutely essential. Just as essential as water. Because if you cannot communicate to another party, it could mean losing something that you well deserve. So let's talk about this for a second, because I brought these here for some weird reason. What else do you do with them? They just collect dust anyway. The reason why I like the idea of competition, the reason why I compete, is actually not because of any of this. That's why I said it's meaningless. In a tournament style competition, the first time I compete, I only have my club. So I'm competing with other members of my affiliation. Like if you guys had a huge team and you had to compete for a spot, no different than athletic teams, they have to compete, JV versus varsity. You're competing within your own family, essentially. So there's that aspect of the competition. It's friendly rivalry. Then you move on. So I had to compete against 8 other people who all had to do the same thing within their clubs. And to go even further, I had to compete with another 8 people. So at that point in time, I am in the top of 64 different competitors, in case you guys. Right. And then by the time I get to the point where I'm at district competition, I have beaten, at that point, 104 different competitors. Regardless of the word beaten, or how negative connotation that may have, what I find extremely valuable is that when I'm competing at the club level, I'm talking to maybe 20, 25 people. The incentive for me to go further is because whatever message it is, whatever platform it is that I have manifested, I get to share it with a larger audience. Now, right now, in this pivotal point of your life, this is the most amount of communication that you'll ever have to deal with. There are people in the adult world that can actually generate an entire income without really even having to talk to another human being. So right now, this is the most that your brain synapses are functioning on a level of communicating with people. You're in a class with several other people. You move from one class to another with several other people. As you get older in life, the amount of communication that you have with other people starts to dwindle. So this is when you're the most actively engaged. Hence, my willingness and my enthusiasm to be able to come out here and share with you today. That is why, closing off on this competition aspect, and for those of you who are competitors, I find that that is far more valuable. The friendships that I've made, the networking that I did, and the amount of people that I was able to reach, this is sort of incidental. This is, because essentially this comes at the end of all of it. And the ceremony, however elaborate it may be, is really small in comparison to the amount of time you spend preparing, training, and actually competing. Now, I want to call this concept detrimental assumptions. Detrimental assumptions. If you were to purchase a violin today, would that make you a musician? If you had the violin in your possession for over 2 years, but never played it, would you intrinsically learn to play the violin just by holding on to it? Right. We often assume that because we have a voice and are talking to another person who speaks the same language, that means that we're effectively communicating. It's the same. Owning an instrument does not make you a musician, and simply voice and sharing a common language does not make you a good communicator. One advice I would give is that we focus way too much, especially in our personal lives, our social lives, whatever it may be. We focus way too much on what we want to say. I just had to get that. I just had to tell someone. Oftentimes, if we have grievances with other people, we will vent to someone else entirely, giving ourselves a false sense of accomplishment because we've said the right thing to the wrong person. And we've done a disservice to ourselves because we have this false sense of completion in that we have not felt compelled to address an issue directly with the person the issue may be with. Or on the positive note, to praise someone who we know deserves the acknowledgement. Correct? Am I losing you guys here? Basically, what we say isn't what someone walks away having heard. And we are wasting our time and theirs, especially if we definitely want them to understand what we just said. A vast majority of the arguments that take place in the world today are because this is what someone said, but this is what someone came away having heard. So it's a concept I call an echo. You can say whatever you want down a cavern. A very small portion of it is going to carry in the echo. The I have a dream speech is extremely long, but we remember one segment that's about 40 seconds. When you're communicating, ask yourself, is there a more effective way for me to have this heard? For instance, this presentation today, if you made your parents aware of it, they will ask you, what did that guy talk about? Now I'm going to have an hour to speak to you, but you're not going to spend an hour summarizing what you heard today. You're probably going to tell them in less than 4 sentences your summary of what the experience was like today, correct? If they ask, sure. Or you went to see a movie. You saw an hour and 45-minute movie, you're not going to spend an hour and 45 minutes talking about it. You're going to take maybe 20 to 30 seconds. And what you're going to share with them are the points that you felt resonated with you. Resonate, echoed, correct? So in what I'm presenting with you today, that's what I'm focusing on. If you guys type it out to where you're typing out every word I say, I'm looking at a total of 16 points. Because if I focus on these specific points, I know, without making it more convoluted or congested with additional data, I know that you at least heard this. That's another point of effective communication. What do you want them to come away having heard? Whether within school, within your family life, your social life, within competitions, you have a finite amount of time to get your point across. What do you want them to walk away and say, they said this? Work from that. Understand that there are some things you're going to have to prioritize to make that point resonate with them. And there are other things that are just filler. And honestly, you could do without. We live in a world today that's extremely confusing and convoluted. And the more words you give people, the more opportunity you give them to get confused. Less is more. With house, with decorating, with conversing. Now, one thing that's happening now is because of the advent of technology and the immense use of it, we're having a lot of people who say, I'm not really good with like over the phone talking, I'm better with texting. You're always better at whatever you do more. If you feel more inclined to text, if your thumbs are communicating more often than your voice, then the level of comfort you're going to have in actual over the phone voice conversation is going to dwindle naturally because you're not doing it as much. If you play basketball a lot and play tennis twice, you're going to be more inclined to play basketball if you want to have enjoyment out of it. But understand that as you enter more of the adult life, having to talk is not just essential, but the mastery of it is an incredible advantage. Especially if you know a lot of your friends, you try and get them on the phone, you have some friends that are chatty and some friends that are extremely reclusive. They'll send you a text, even when you just called and they ignored your call. Are they in the library? Are they in a movie theater? Are they having a elaborate dinner? No, because the sense of anxiety associated talking, not even face to face, is so daunting. They would rather just resume with text. The problem with text versus voice is that you lose out on so many essential tools when it comes to communication. I am a leader of a pretty large organization, and so I have to take all these leadership trainings. I had to take a whole training class on how to compose emails, because when someone reads something you wrote, there is no context. You can go with the all caps, exclamation points, and like question mark, exclamation point, and all your little fancy acronyms if you want. That's not really effective. The problem is when someone reads something you wrote, how they take it has more to do with how they are feeling when they read it than how you were feeling when you composed it. But when you're speaking verbally, especially face to face, there's intonations, there's demeanor, there's posture, we'll get into that later, but there are all these additional tools at your disposal that are conveying the point so much better than just writing. Again, you don't get better at anything by doing it less. So a lot of people, doesn't matter what age you are, a lot of people have that's what I call the whole social atrophy, communication atrophy. It's a muscle that you don't use, and so it becomes weaker and weaker. No different than if you were running and you broke your ankle and you're in a cast or whatever. When you go to finally run again, you're gonna have a much harder time running the same distance. You guys with me? Okay, just the most polite audience ever. Okay, cool. Word choice. Again, talking about the efficiency of communication. What is the fewest amount of words without coming across being rude, right? Because sometimes brevity isn't necessarily seen as efficient. It's seen as impolite. I found that especially here in New Orleans. I'm not from here originally. And people in the South, they would prefer you take things slow, you talk slow, you relax. And every once in a while, you just utter the words, who dat? You know, just doesn't matter if it's game day, whatever. Just, hey, how's everything going? Who dat, right? All right, cool. For instance, here's why word choice is so critical. When I first moved to New Orleans, I moved to Treme. It was the most historical city. I wanted to boast about how I lived in Treme. Now, I moved here in 2014, okay? The film industry was still very, very present during that time. I'm at a coffee shop, and I run into one of my neighbors. I lived in a sixplex, so I had neighbors nearby. I ran into one of them at a coffee shop, and they said, I wouldn't go back to the apartment right now because they're shooting. The police have it blocked off. You can't even get back to the house if you wanted to. I was terrified. Now, they could have just easily said, filming. They are filming over by our apartment complex. That was a joke. Yes, all right. Anyway, but word choice is extremely important. So, how can I say it? What do I want to say? And what words am I going to use to convey that point to make sure they walk away having heard specifically that, to the best of your ability, because there's always a filter. When it comes to conversations, it's a lot like a math equation, which is to say, let's say the entire statement that you want to convey takes 10 sentences, so 10. Now, if you have 3 sentences that go off on one rant, 1 sentence that conveys how you feel, you're at 4, 5 more that go off on a complete tangent, and 1 left. Very little of your point is coming across. But if each statement that you make within it works, correlates, and conveys, that is how, at the end, you're like studying with somebody, and like you're working on like algebra, whatever, and you're just like 52, how'd you get to 52? I have 30. It's the same thing. Conversationally, they went on one point, you went on another, and unfortunately, you guys didn't end up with the same result. But very seldom do we ever look at conversations like we do a math equation. It's like, hey, just to check in, what did you hear? Okay, no, that's not what I meant. Because if you don't clarify, things can get really confusing. Especially with the finite amount of time you have, the judges are there, the competitors are there. Crutch words. These are words Like, so, you know, and the new one is literally. I literally was like so freaked out because my boss like literally bit my head off. It's like, how are you telling me this story if your boss literally bit your head off? And the problem with crutch words, say to yourself, would you write, if you were writing what you were saying, would you write would you write would you write so, like, you know? Some people would, but a vast majority of us wouldn't. When it comes to communication, especially with the finite amount of time you have, with anyone's attention, competition's aside, if I'm talking to someone from Southern California, and they say, and like, so I was, and then like, I don't even listen to them anymore. I'm not paying attention to the words that are coming out of their mouth because all I'm focused on is how much they are saying absolutely nothing. If you look at the people who are successful in politics or anything where they are speaking to the public, even if their point isn't that valid, if they can communicate effectively and keep people's attention, they automatically start to garner more interest. You don't want to have anything holding you back, and you want to utilize all the tools that will help you move forward, especially considering, again, a vast majority of people are not lucky enough to be hearing me today. So there's that. I know, I'm fine, thank you. A lot of times people will use crutch words because their mouth is outrunning their brain. So they feel like they can't just say nothing. They have to say something. And as a result, it has the opposite effect that whatever comes after that is meaningless. Pauses are extremely effective. If you just said something that's compelling, if you just said something that's philosophical, deep, or funny, allow a pause. Because we are sponges, and if you don't give us time to soak, whatever comes after that is just going to spill over. Pauses, essentially saying nothing, is one of the most useful tools you can use in any communication. Because the opposite, if you think about it, if you give someone no time to process anything, if you watch a comedy show, the guy tells a joke and then immediately just starts talking again, the audience is just sitting there like, okay, I'm sorry for interrupting you with laughter. I'll just stay quiet, I guess. I don't know. Or if you just said something that is extremely thought-provoking and you don't give time for people to process it, the part of their brain is just going to start to reject that data because they're assuming that since you didn't give them time to hear it, to understand it doesn't mean anything, and whatever's coming after that is obviously really, really important. Think of any great film. Before a big action sequence, usually there's a pause. Things are still. Horror movies, definitely do it. A lot of the stories you hear use pauses effectively. It's an incredible tool. So take that into consideration. Now, there are two different forms of communication. There's nonverbal and there's verbal. Nonverbal, use of the area, body language, facial expressions, posture, demeanor. You guys probably carry backpacks that are like 40 pounds, so the posture is not going to be that great. But the power pose is very real, ladies. Standing like this actually feels better and presents yourself better. If anyone is fearful or unsure, they start to do this. They start to get very condensed, and it conveys a lack of confidence. So nonverbal communication, demeanor, how you overall carry yourself, posture, how well you stand, facial expression, because I can say I smiled, or I can just say, and after she said that. This is not just a means of carrying your brain around, it is its own tool. So, use of area, body language, facial expressions, posture, demeanor. Now we're going to move into verbal communication. So there's cadence. Cadence is essentially how your words flow. Tone, how elevated or how low your tone can get. Inflection, how much power you resonate behind it. Vocal variety. And conviction, how much power is generated behind what you are saying now. It's not that this is more important because I'm saying it louder. This is more important because there's more conviction behind it. Cool. Okay. There are two different forms of listening: active listening and inactive listening. Active listening, making direct eye contact. Intermittent acknowledgement. You ever talk to somebody and you're like, no, yeah, wow, yeah. And then you have involuntary responses. You say something and without them even realizing it, they're like freaked out. You said something that's scary, you said something that's inconvenient, you said something, whatever the case may be, and you see their body almost involuntarily respond to what you just said. Inactive listening. Naturally, obviously, closed off, not making any eye contact at all, arms crossed, which is just like, okay, when is this over? It's like a dentist appointment, but for my ears. And when they're just easily distracted. And in today's world, there are TVs, cell phones, screens everywhere. It is extremely difficult to have anyone's undivided attention. It is the most valuable commodity on the planet. Undivided attention. As a matter of fact, everyone right now, the most valuable commodity, people are actively spending money on their attention. So ironically, if you do not pay attention, you will fall victim to people who are paying for your attention. Yes, that's good, thank you. Confidence is key. Confidence is key. Right now, we live in a society, especially because of social media, we can't shame a lot of things. You can't speak negatively about a lot of things. And yet confidence is constantly shunned on. For instance, if you message out, having a bad day, oh my God, I feel so ugly, you're gonna get bombarded by people who are like, no girl, you're beautiful, you're great, you got this. Princess becoming a queen, right? You're gonna get that. But if you start sending all these photos, all these messages like, man, I look good. I am so beautiful, see me in these shoes. If you don't garner the right attention, yet people are like, I guess. I don't know how that even fits you. It looks like it's like the buckles and the buttons are coming undone. I guess, I don't know. Or they start sending you pictures of other animals like hippos and dolphins. Is that just me? They just do it. Oh, that's fine. The point is, we live in a society where if you're low, people love the idea of lifting you up. But if you are being your own cheerleader, your own source of support, a lot of people are just like, who does she think she is? What is all that? Am I right? You guys gonna act like I don't know? I know. Okay. And now that's having a lot of lasting effects in just the way that we carry ourselves. We're afraid. We're afraid to say, I'm smart, I'm beautiful, I'm talented, I'm really successful. Because you cannot live in this society today and shine your light without other people feeling as though you're dimming theirs. Yes? Yes. Remember that whole verbal, non-verbal, active, inactive, listening? Okay. Forget all that. Be as confident as you want. You're here. You're here in a place that your parents feel is as conducive to your success as possible. That's what you're doing here. They want you to feel as empowered by your support, your education, so that you can have what? Confidence. You can feel more confident in the outside world, in further education, wherever your path may lead you. Your family is trying to generate as much momentum as possible. It's as though you're going hiking. They are loading your backpack with everything they think you would possibly need so that you can go as far on your journey as possible and feel prepared with the resources and the tools that you would need, whatever might come along your path. Is that too poetic? It's true though. Okay, thank you. The reason why confidence is so important, I look like a floating torso, all these trophies. The difference between two different candidates getting the same job, they're both equally qualified, that's why they got the interview. The difference between the two is not how they look on paper. The paper is a filtration system, right? The difference is how well they presented themselves during the interview process. The difference between two different people trying to get a date with the same person, even if one person's more compatible, like on paper, you're like, that's a Leo, she's a Sagittarius, that should work. Why? What is getting in the way? The reason is because the person who honestly was better suited for them was not able to present themselves in a way that was convincing enough. And like, we don't want to like eat alone all the time. We want to see a movie alone all the time. We don't want to go to dance alone all the time. We got to pick somebody. And this one isn't prettier, but they talk good. They talk real good. And so that's the person we choose. It is depressing to think you could have all the grades, the best education, be indisputably the most qualified person for the position of your dreams, and then get to the interview, which, by the way, is just another form of competition. Walk away knowing in your heart that you did not get the job because you didn't know how to answer. You weren't comfortable. You weren't confident. You didn't utilize the tools that Anthony told you when you were in school. No, seriously, it's upsetting to me because I see it. I see it on a daily basis. I see people who are smart, who are extremely talented. But they say things. What grades are we all in?
Junior.
Senior.
Do you guys take psychology here? Any psychology courses? Okay, cool, good. How am I doing on time? Oh, I'm doing great. I'm going to talk about two psychological principles that have a lot to do with confidence. The first is self-fulfilling prophecy. Raise your hand if you know what self-fulfilling prophecy is. Great. Cool. Preconceived notions. Raise your hand if you know what preconceived notions are. Awesome. I'm winning. Okay. Self-fulfilling prophecy. I'll give you an example and then I'll give you a definition. And honestly, in today's world, examples mean more because everyone has their own definition of everything. Self-fulfilling prophecy. I don't test well. I'm not good at math. Math sucks. I'm not good at it. I don't do well. I see all these numbers and I'm just like, is there like a number dyslexia? I think I have number dyslexia. Is that a 4? I don't even, oh my gosh. I think she's writing it weird. I'm really bad at math. I'm not good at tests. That's all self-fulfilling prophecy. It is when you are not stating the truth, but in fact, constantly creating the truth. You're not stating the truth, you're creating the truth. No different than in your adult world, right? You're like, oh, I see him and he's super cute, but I'm really shy. I'm really shy. I don't know how to talk. I don't even know what flirting is. I don't even know what to say. In that moment, there's this whole concept called fake it till you make it, right? So the way that the internal saboteur works in our mind, in our hearts, in our spirit, is that everything you don't do is a weapon the internal saboteur will use against you. Every time you didn't speak up, every time you didn't try, every time you didn't go all the way through to the best of your ability, the internal saboteur is taking inventory. So the next time you try to do something, it is going to use this reservoir of artillery against you. Well, you didn't do that, so why do you think you can do that? You didn't even try that, so why would you try that? Am I getting too deep? Has this not happened to you? This definitely happened to you. Okay, great. That's all self-fulfilling prophecy. Now, seeing the power of it, you can use that on your own. You can say, I'm definitely getting better at math. I'm going to do really well on this test. Now, that's not you being delusional. That is you using the same energy that has pulled you back to push you forward. Or you can be even more honest with yourself. I haven't been that great at math, but I'm getting better. I have been pretty shy in the past, but I don't want to be. I want to be more confident. I want to talk to more people. I want to have more friends. Is way healthier than saying, I'm really shy, I don't have that many friends, and it's like not that big of a deal to me anyway. It totally is. You will never meet more people in a day. You will never be in as condensed of an atmosphere. The only time you get this in your adult world is if you go to a convention and you don't know those people anyway, you're not going to talk to them. Like, where's my whole team? Self-fulfilling prophecy. Preconceived notions. Anyone want to take a guess what preconceived notions is?
Maybe believe it beforehand?
Correct. Preconceived notions is essentially you negatively coaching yourself before something ever even happens. So if self-fulfilling prophecy is saying, I'm really shy, so I don't talk to people, preconceived notions is, if I talk to them, they're just going to make me feel stupid. If I try this, I'm just going to fail anyway. Self-fulfilling prophecy, preconceived notions. Where the mind goes, the body follows. You are essentially, at the core, just as capable as any other student in this school. If you have the same tools, the same resources, there are 24 hours in your day, just like theirs, unless you are missing an appendage or limb. Even those who are visually impaired, you have glasses. Why do we assume people who wear glasses are smart? Isn't that weird? We automatically assume if you wear glasses, you're really smart.
It's like a misconception.
Right? If somebody was on crutches, you wouldn't assume they were a good athlete, right?
Mm-hmm.
No, it's just a glasses joke. I wish I could wear them, but anyway. I actually wore like clear frames for a little while just to look cool, and it didn't work. I was living a lie. Now, I want to get into some, if you're here for no other reason, like, how do I get better? How do I win? How do I do this to the point where I can succeed? There's time allotted for that. Ways to win. Ways to win. If you talk with a smile, people feel it. Actually, fun fact, if you're on the phone and you smile while talking to them, the conversation actually goes more pleasant. Studies. You want to look them up? I'll do that. I don't care. You talk with a smile, because when I was in sales, they said talk with a smile, and it makes them more likely to be comfortable with you on the phone. Totally true. If you speak with a smile, I have RBF. Anyway, I don't smile often, but I realize the strength of the tool. If you make direct eye contact, which I have with every single one of you throughout this speech, if you make direct eye contact, you are holding that person captive. Because they're not going to be impolite. They're definitely going to look back. And even if they weren't looking at you at first, you can feel people looking at you. But if you make direct eye contact, every single person, especially the judges, feel like they mattered, and for that one moment in time, you were talking directly to them. In the vast majority of these competitions, everyone gets a judging sheet because they want to provide some sort of camouflage. But you can see people who are using the sheet as a coaster and people who brought a really nice pen. So when I'm competing, I am making eye contact, I'm penning the room, and then I say to myself, okay, that's a judge, that's a judge, that's a judge. And when I make key points, I look at each one of them at a different segment of time. Convey compassion. In other words, show you want it more. When it comes to any competition, I was talking before about conviction. When you show compassion, it means I can tell from the way that you are saying it to me, you genuinely, wholeheartedly believe in what you're saying. It matters to you. I'm highly allergic to cats. I don't even get the point. It's like a roommate doesn't pay rent, and it's just like, I'll talk to you when I feel like it. But if you present a very compelling argument as to why I should foster a cat, I might. But they would. Size up your competitor and then shrink them down. I paid for school with drama and cheerleading. True story. When I was in high school and junior high, I also did wrestling because it didn't conflict seasonally. Whenever we went to another school or another school came to ours, I immediately was trying to find the person that I would be competing with, and I would just stare them down. I know this seems like a very volatile tactic, but it works because they're just as nervous as you are. Well, not actually, they're less nervous because they weren't here today to hear any of this. So they're probably more nervous than you are, and you're way more confident, is really what it is. See, confidence is key. Thank you. Seriously, size them up, stare them down, have your key points, hand to the judges, speak to them as well, pick a few points in the audience as well, go back, done. Use metaphors and similes. This is something I do fairly often. You can take something that's extremely daunting in regular life and put it to something much easier to absorb or understand. One of the most famous ones is life is like a box of chocolates, right? You never know what you're gonna get. Can you imagine Forrest Gump saying, life is composed of various circumstances that happen throughout your existence. And as much as you'd like to feel prepared for what life may bring you, you have no clue what might happen or what you'll do. You see what I'm saying? He loses the audience. But life is like a box of chocolates. Sort of conveys the same point, or at least introduces the same level of complexity in that subject. So use simple, sometimes poetic terminology to pull people in. Insert humor if and when possible. I have failed at that today, but I try. The reason why is because dopamine chemical level, people, once they laugh, they are more engaged. They're more emotionally vested in what's taking place. I thought the joke at the trophy store was one of like really brick you guys. I really didn't buy all these. I won them by paying memberships to various. I kind of bought them because I used that money. And that filming joke just did not go well. That's a thing that actually happened. My neighbor said they were shooting by my apartment, and I slept at my friend's house for 2 days. In the Bywater, which was more dangerous at the time than just going, even if they were shooting, just go back home. Give the keys. Walk around. They should have just said filming. I think they were messing with me. Now, what you can do, and politicians do this very often, the way to win an argument is you allow your opponent to create what are the indisputable grounds. And then you use a tool called if then. Oh, if that is the case, then this. You're taking all the time that they vested in presenting an argument or a point, you're using it essentially against them and saying, well, if that is true, then you're borrowing all of the time and energy that they have put into presenting one argument, and you've turned it to perpetuating your goals and your ideals. That is the extent of what I have for you today, but I would love to know if you guys had any questions or any specific circumstances that you would like some advice or guidance on. Yes.
So you mentioned earlier in your speech about like international speeches and the call to action. So what are your favorite calls to actions based off previous speeches you did?
Great question.
Thank you.
I have a lot of tattoos. We're sure to cover it all up, but there is one that I purposely have that's exposed. It says someone else. Someone else. This is another psychological principle. Have you guys ever heard of the bystander effect? Raise your hand. 2 people. Okay, I have this tattoo, someone else. The bystander effect is a psychological principle. It's an unfortunate fact. The more people that are around to see something horrible happen, the less likely anyone is to do something about it. Perfect example, if you are going along and you see someone who has fallen and their feet are stuck in mud, you look around, quick assessment, there is no one else there, you are more likely to help that person out. But if the same exact thing is happening in a more condensed area, and you do a quick inventory and you see 10 other people, you will walk away with what you consider the safe assumption that that person either already has someone helping them or someone on their way to do so. One of my call to actions was to talk about the power of someone else. This is a speech that I did at the height of quarantine, and the argument that I presented is again, where the mind goes, the body follows. And the mortality rate was really high amongst people who were already in the hospital and didn't have any visitors. My argument is that the potency of COVID paled in comparison to what loneliness can do when someone is trying to heal, because they just want to know that someone else cares, that someone else understands. They just want to know that someone else is there. And I told people that we are watching all these movies about superheroes when you don't need flight or speed or superior strength to save a life. All you have to do is let someone else know that someone else understands. And I asked people to reach out, to ask someone, how are you? And to allow the time, however long it may take, for someone to ask a question they've been conditioned to dismiss. Very simple, very emotional, very executable call to action. I didn't ask people to amass thousands of dollars. I didn't ask them to get a passport and travel the world. I asked them to do something that they had the means of doing in a short period of time with the resources they had readily available. And they had no excuse not to do so. Good question. Yes?
Who was the person that really inspired you?
Who really inspired me? That is a challenging question. I am not as fortunate as I'm sure many of you are. I have been the sole provider for myself since I was 14. So one would say that sometimes you are surrounded by people who show you exactly what you should do. They compel you to emulate who they are and what they do. In other words, my dad's a musician, and just seeing him, I want to be a musician. My mom's a teacher, and seeing the effect she had on kids, I want to be a teacher. I had the opposite effect. I grew up around people that were walking in a direction I did not want to go, that were doing things I realized I did not want to do. So while they did not give me things on my list to circle, they gave me several things to cross out. And as a result of the process of elimination, it allowed me to be the first person in my family to graduate from high school, to go to college. I started a company, but if I had to find someone who inspired me, this is gonna sound weird, but Shel Silverstein is actually one of my favorite writers. And he wrote The Giving Tree. You guys ever read The Giving Tree? If you haven't, go home, read it. It's a very quick read. But he wrote a series of books in it. It turns out he lived a very wild life. He was an artist, and he was a writer, he was a photographer, he traveled the world. But he was able to say really beautiful, thought-provoking ideas using very simple words and very poorly illustrated cartoons. I mean, by society standards, they're not, there's no color. I mean, if you open a Shel Silverstein book, it will look like a coloring book. But I read those and I realized the power of words. Now, fun fact, I've spoken to you today without any real issues in communicating comfortably. I walked into this room, I don't know any of you. When I was younger, I moved from New York down to South Florida, and I had a hardcore New York accent. I also had what's called baby speech. You ever had like a 1-year-old or a 2-year-old, like, the water in the dragon? Okay, it's super cute when they're like 2, 3. When they're 7, it's not cute. So I stuttered, I had baby speech, and I had a very, very hardcore accent. I was basically Matt Damon. No, I'm kidding. He's from Boston, but he has a strong accent. And here I am today, speaking to all of you, having never met you, coming across as funny as humanly possible. I just did a comedy show last night. People paid to see me. Anyway. So the idea is, especially when it comes to winning or getting to a certain point, if that's all you see, then getting there is going to diminish your sense of momentum. They teach you in martial arts, if someone is here, you don't want to go here, you want to go past. In everything in life, you don't want to just get to a point and then just be done with it. You want to go further than that. And so for me, it wasn't enough to just get to the point where I could hold a conversation and feel okay. Because for 2 years of my life, I hardly spoke. I was in the gifted program. My teachers left me alone. I had 147 IQ. They just assumed I would teach myself. And from 10 to 12, I hardly spoke. And I'm sure when you guys were 11 or 12, you never stopped speaking. So here I am today, because I realized that words have power. And I think if utilized for the right reasons, in the right time, words change lives. As I said before, teams win because of what they were inspired, what they heard before heading out to the field. Entire military sides win because of the power of the motivation. It is, I think, an extremely critical tool when it comes to success and happiness. And in your adult life, or even in now, let's not even devalue or diminish where you stand now, regardless of how young you are. Being able to say what you think and how you feel in a way that whatever other person is involved really, truly grasps. It's a superpower in today's world. To be heard, to be understood, and to be self-expressed is incredibly, I don't know how else to compare it. It's critical. What other questions do you have? Yes?
You talked about like how like you size up your competitor
Yes.
and like you shrink them down. Can you like elaborate more on like how that would help in speaking or like just in general terms?
Sure. As far as, so I'm not a tall guy, but it's a tool that I've just learned to utilize. I have a very sort of powerful demeanor in the way that I carry myself, in the way that I walk, right? So I walk with purpose. Even if I'm lost, I walk like I know exactly where I'm going and I'm 15 minutes late. And I suggest you all do that too, especially you. When it comes to sizing up your opponent, and this is because, especially a lot of one-on-one competitions, a lot of it is a head game. A lot of it is a head game. Tennis, boxing, wrestling, I mean, it goes on and on. When I talk about sizing up your opponent, it's just, you guys are in teams. If you see that you have one person that's going to be going against you stare them down. They're already uncomfortable. I don't care how confident they come across. They have this seemingly insurmountable fear that they will not get their point across, that they will not be concise, that they will not win, that they're gonna disappoint their aunt and their mom, who are both videotaping them. Why not just one person record it, and then you watch it later? You're not even gonna watch it! You're gonna have it anyway. You stare them down. You make a point to let them know all of your nerves, the whole fake it till you make it, you're looking at them so as to say, see, when you do it, it's like I'm burning a hole in your eyeballs. But the idea is that they're going to, conventionally, you're looking down at whatever, you're looking at your friends, trying to see if that person who said they were going to show up actually showed up. Okay, maybe traffic. No. Take all that opportunity to look at the team you're competing against, to look at the person you're going against. Get a real assessment of like how comfortable, how confident their posture, their demeanor, all that nonverbal communication. Get a real feel for how much of that they have going on. Because you can't see what they're looking to present, but you can see how they're going to present. You understand? Mm-hmm. Okay. Other questions? Yes.
How do you feel with or how do you deal with feelings of anxiety or unpreparedness before competitions?
No one knows what you're going to say, right? I could have given you guys the bullet points, but you'd have no idea what any of this meant. It looks like garbled words. You don't know. You don't even know that I missed the whole section. I didn't, by the way. You are your greatest competitor in any aspect of life, because you're with you all the time. No one's in here except for you. It's like a party of one. No one else has been invited, correct? You're stuck in all this. So it's realizing that that internal saboteur is there, but there's another voice as well. And if you give less attention to all the negative thoughts from not having this self-fulfilling prophecy, from not having negative preconceived notions, if you focus on the positive aspects, even if you don't know, the point is, how comfortable do you feel communicating? Even if a lot of these trophies, I had no idea what the question was. There was no way for me to prepare. It's like talking to a 7-year-old who's going to ask you why, no matter what answer you give them. To focus. 1, give less energy, less time and attention to these negative mantras that are surging in your head. 2, realize that no one knows how it's supposed to go. Focus on what the end goal is, and just make sure that whatever it is that you do correlates to that. If my goal today simply was to help you guys feel a little more comfortable about communicating, it might not be overly ambitious, but everything I've said, crappy jokes aside, everything I've said has hopefully let you feel a little bit more knowledgeable, a little bit more comfortable. So it didn't really matter how many of my own words I followed through or in what order. Did I get there? Great. Did I get there the way I thought I would? No. But I got there. Does that make sense to you? Okay. Yes.
Okay, so when you talk about like being unprepared and not knowing the prompt you're gonna be giving in the question,
Sure.
is there like a formula you use for questions you really don't know what they're talking about? Like if I'm gonna prompt to get like a topic about ice cream, how do you find like something bigger to pull out of that?
Great question. You can make a correlation from one to the other. You can start to develop what's called pathways. So if the subject is ice cream, you can say something about how reminiscent it is when you hear the music of an ice cream truck. Or you can talk about how easily it melts. You see what I'm saying? So maybe you're lactose intolerant and you're like, just the fact that they brought up ice cream is like giving you shivers. You can talk about you can talk about being lactose intolerant, whatever the subject may be, but you make a correlation in some manner. And it is a muscle. It's a muscle that you work, and a lot of it's gonna happen just from being more conversational. The fact that I am exposed to a high quantity of people over a given amount of time makes it more likely. For instance, I'm a stand-up comic. Last night I did a set, and all of my jokes were jokes that I'd never done on stage. But if I came across as though I didn't have the validation of hundreds of people having laughed at it prior, the crowd would have felt that, and it would not have gone well. I would have two jokes that had no correlation whatsoever. I just insert something, a statement in between, that creates a bridge so that it seems far more cohesive. How do you get better at it? Like anything else, by doing it more. Similes, metaphors definitely help, because you can take something that seems sort of convoluted or daunting and make it a little bit more simplified in a way that really causes the audience to resonate more with what you just said. Does that answer your question? Okay. Yes.
How do you know when to like pace and like pause your speeches to where it makes an impact on people?
If you're giving a speech and it's a prepared speech, the best way to insert a pause is actually to just return. So as you're looking at it, you can see it there. If you have just come up with a fact, 16% of the people who play Monopoly end up in jail before they ever pass go. 9% of the inner city kids end up in jail before they ever pass the 12th grade. When you have stuff like that, I don't know, it's 9%, it's just a joke. See, okay. I thought it was funny. When you have something, when you're stating something that you really want, like you put a lot of time and attention into it, maybe it's a statistic, maybe it's research. Give them time, because especially if you're giving data, if there's numbers, dates, years, whoa. Give me a few. Hold on a second, let me soak that in. Okay, 1973, 380 people, carry the one. Insert those pauses, because you've given me a ton of data that you're going to call to later. And if you rush over it and you mentioned it afterwards, you're reintroducing it to me for the first time. In comedy, there's a callback. You guys have watched stand-up comedy, yeah? The non-Glover stuff? Okay, great. So somebody will tell a joke. And if they rolled over that joke real quick and continued on, and they have a callback referencing that time they were with their girlfriend and the girlfriend fought on their behalf, and you didn't hear it the first time, you're hearing it now, and it's not as funny because you're not understanding that there's a correlation to it before. So if you have something that you're introducing that you know you're going to reference later, insert a pause. So that when you bring it up again, you've already done the work to allow them to gravitate towards that and create that echo, so you can activate it later. Does that answer your question? Cool. Yes?
So I know it's kind of obvious because you mentioned impromptu several times throughout like your speaking, but what is your favorite like speech and debate like event? And then what is an event that you wish you were good at but you really like think is interesting?
Yeah, it has been a good while. What are the different categories?
Congress, public forum, Lincoln Douglas, original oratory, impromptu.
I mean, original oratory was a strong point.
Same.
Yeah, I mean, because, not to go against everything I said, but you can put more energy behind it because there's more emotional investment that's already taken place. I think impromptu, you really can work that muscle, and the fact that the vast majority of society thinks that everyone comes from a fresh slate isn't necessarily true. When you have tools at your disposal, you can repeat back, that'll buy you some time. But original oratory and impromptu, definitely. One, because I feel I just dedicated more time and I was a lot more passionate. And I really do think that people really, they feel that. They really do. And as unbiased as the whole process is and as rigid as the judging is, if you come across more compassionate, more emotionally invested, you're gonna garner a lot more support. It's just natural human nature. So use that.
Follow-up question, would you guys like go over one of my like oratory speeches one day? I don't
Sure.
know.
I actually brought cards, you guys can email me all that good stuff. I'm here to help, absolutely. Yes.
Okay, so you've been doing it for a while, so are there any like topics that you think are like so overused that you've gotten sick of hearing?
Man, that is such a great question. If I hear one more ridiculous, stupid speech about Thomas Edison finding 999 ways to not invent a light bulb, or however many it is, PTSD doesn't even allow me to activate the number. Is it 999 and then it was 1,000? If I hear one more antiquated quote, I don't like it. I don't like people quoting, I think it's lazy. I couldn't imagine, I've never quoted someone else. One, because it takes up time to use someone else's words. Two, you have to reference who that is and when they said it. So that's just, it feels intrusive. It feels like inviting someone else who's dead, most likely, into what I'm presenting, and then being like, all right, cool, I got it. Thanks, Ben Franklin. All right, good job. Good on you. There's no point. And so many people do it, and I feel it's really lazy. I mean, I get it. Some people see it as like a matter of respect. It means that you put time and energy and research into what you're presenting. I don't see it that way. I just see it as you couldn't come up with something creative and original during this 25-second segment, and you have 45 seconds max, so you're having somebody chip in for you. I don't like it. I don't like cliches. I don't like take it one day at a time, or everything happens for a reason. If your presentation consists of something that was on a calendar I threw away before the year expired, you're losing me, because I get that it's not, you can't cite it, it's just, anonymous. But now all you're doing is bringing me back to my aunt who bought it for me one Christmas because she didn't really know me that well and didn't want to not get me anything. Am I being too cynical? If you can tell, those things really irritate me, because I really think that given people's life experiences, there is so much raw, original content to present. When it comes to speech and debate, it's different, because it's no different than law. If you look at law now, all you're doing is, here's this new case, but here are all the different cases in the past that are relevant to this, presenting it before the judge and saying, based on this, so the choices we make today that impact the future are being referenced and perpetuated by the past. Yeah, I want authentic, I want current, I want genuine, I want original for me. Questions?
Do you have any tips to gain self-confidence?
Besides everything presented thus far. Okay. One, seriously, standing like this genuinely helps. When you're like this, you see people like that in the hallway. And when I see them, especially like my own friends, I just assume they have like resting something's wrong face. You ever seen those people? You're like, hey, you alright? Yeah, I'm fine. Well, why? Do you think something's wrong? And now they feel obligated to make up something because everyone's bombarding them. No, but are you like not feeling well? Is something going on? It's like, no, I'm fine. And then they're gonna, well, why do you ask? I'm like, oh, nothing, because you're not gonna say, well, because you look like you just buried your cat yesterday. Like, you're not gonna say that, but their body is saying it. So I would say, one, when you speak to be heard. When you walk as though it's purposeful and deliberate. If, let's say you know where you're going, you know exactly where you're going, you know when you need to be there, and you're just like already your body is telling me that you look lost and you look very in your feelings. But when you move like this, like that is a force to be reckoned with. My friends, when they come over, when they visit me, and we go on Bourbon Street, which I don't recommend, please don't go there. They have seen me clear crowds. I'm not tall, I'm not intimidating, I don't weigh like 300 pounds, I'm not super muscular. I'm fit, thank you. But when I walk, I just walk in such a way where people taller than me, larger than me, are just like, that guy looks like he has somewhere he definitely needs to go. So when it comes to confidence, one is if you talk like this, what? They're going to tune out. So speak to be heard, stand to be seen, walk with purpose. If you just do things like that are within your realm of influence, it's going to help you with things that aren't. With the random things that occur in your regular life, the topics that you introduce out of nowhere, work on the things that you can influence on a consistent daily basis. Mastery over those things will provide the tools to perpetuate more confidence for things that you are unsure of, and then become more confident. But again, this might seem like super common sense, but you don't get better at anything by doing it less. Right? That was not on the calendar. But seriously, I really, going back to Shel Silverstein, that's what I like, is even though I've used some $5 words on you guys, I scored high on my SATs and SATs, so both just for the heck of it. Anyways, simplicity is really where it's at. If you can take something that is extremely complicated and convoluted, I get that you have this incredible vocabulary, but what's the point of being verbose? If you can say it simply, within a few words, and still feel as though you got the point across and you conveyed what you were trying to say, do that. Because you have a very limited amount of time to say whatever you're going to say and for it to be heard. Because people are still listening after you've stopped speaking. They're listening to the echo, whether they know it or not. So, does that answer your question? Do you see how every time I'm asking, because I'm not a hypocrite, and if what I said is not what you heard, I want to check in. Cool. I want you to ask me a question. Anything.
What's your favorite hobby, apart from speaking?
What is my favorite hobby aside from speaking? Buying bikes that I don't ride nearly as much as I'd like to. When I first moved to New Orleans, I purposely did not have a vehicle. One of the reasons why I moved to New Orleans from South Florida was because the city was so small. I had traveled here prior, and I knew how the roads were, and I realized that getting around by a bike was going to be way better. And I knew that any place that serves drive-through daiquiris was probably not a good place to try and insure a car. So I came here without one, and I rode a bike. And I really, really enjoyed seeing the city on a bike. And 6 stolen bikes later, I still enjoy the city. But the problem is, I don't stop. I used to wander and then stop and lock the bike. And now I ride, and then I sit at a coffee shop looking at my bike obsessively. Like I'm the guy who's thinking about stealing it. I'm like, no, that's mine. You're like, there's 2 locks on it. I'm like, that's only gonna buy me 15 seconds. But yeah, one of my favorite hobbies is riding a bike, enjoying the city from that perspective. And I thought that so many people, like when I first got here and I saw these people with bikes, it's like, wow, these grown-ups are very environmentally friendly. No, they have DUIs, so they can't drive. They're not legally allowed to drive. They don't care about the environment. They don't have $3,800 to get their license back. So I thought they were my friends.
What happens if you get an impromptu and you come up with nothing, like absolutely nothing? What do you recommend doing?
If you get into a what?
Like an impromptu quote, and you
Okay.
can't think of anything to say, like nothing. What do you do?
You piggyback. You take subjects and what do you enjoy doing? Like what do you enjoy doing for fun with your own time?
Feeding animals.
Feeding animals? All you do is you create a connection to whatever you just heard, to any species, phylum, whatever, as far as an animal. Like, give me a question, any question you want, go ahead.
What is your favorite animal?
No. Give me a come on, one of you guys, give me a completely unrelated topic.
Is public transportation good?
Is public transportation good? I would like to ride the bus more, but unfortunately the fact that I cannot bring my cat onto the bus makes it really difficult for me because I have a huge bonding experience with the cat. It's a stray. I rescued it 4 years ago. And a lot of places that I'm going to, it's leisurely. See what I just did? Give me another one.
4.
Huh?
4.
Thor. It's crazy that Thor was part of the Guardians of the Galaxy and they had that raccoon. You know, it's so crazy because people see raccoons and they think that, you know, because they're rodents and how they are, but they're like, no, I met the sweetest raccoon. Give me another one. Fruit. I was not being as attentive to my dog as I would have liked. And I've never eaten an orange rind, but for some reason, my dog loves them.
Orange what?
Orange rind?
Like the peel.
Oh, right. Oh, sorry. I thought you said it with a W.
All you do, so now animals, all you do is you start creating these sort of invisible tools and you add more and more and more so that you can make a correlation from something you know nothing about to something you feel completely comfortable talking about, buying yourself time, circling back to making it relevant to what you first heard. Does that make sense? Cool. Ask me a question.
I could be anything.
Whatever you like.
What movie would I film by your house?
What movie were they filming by my house? There was a comedy movie, oh my gosh, about a cat that no seriously, it's like a gangster cat. Do you guys know this comedy, Key and Peele? Key and Peele were doing this movie about how there is a cat that gets kidnapped and they have to rescue it. Do you know what I'm talking about? And the name of the movie was Key and Peele movie about a cat. Keanu. They were filming Keanu. Okay.
Stop, this cat looks so funny.
Huh?
I saw it right when you said it, and I'm like, he looks so funny.
You see what happened? Completely unrelated. No, I'm not lying. They were filming Keanu. And then my friend works over there. By the way, that was a gag. He really did say that to me. His name's Justin Trim, and he was lying. He purposely said shooting instead of filming because he knew I was gullible and scared. He worked as a PA on the film and then got me a job as an extra for a little while because it's like, why not extra money? Yeah. Has anyone not asked me? It doesn't mean you guys can't stop asking me questions. She has not. Chloe?
Yeah.
Mhm.
How long did it take you to like put all those awards in the box?
Great question. At first, I debated whether to do it, but what's funny is all this stuff was sort of scattered around, and I thought, what better excuse is there to just gather all this up together? Because I could come in here and say I'm great at all this, right? And I thought that it would be a very useful tool to say, hey, I got all this stuff, but by the way, I was gonna do something dramatic, but I realized it's your glass and it's gonna break. They're like, but none of this matters! It took me about an hour and a half, because it was at 5 different places. This isn't even all of them, that's not to boast. This isn't even all of them. And this stuff only happens, some of these things only happen once a year. And I've only been involved in it in like 12 years. And there's like 26 trophies. Because I cheat, I compete in 2 different states at the same time, because they went virtual.
What?
Yeah. I mean, it's not cheating, it's just teleportation digitally. But yeah, I mean, I wasn't a fan of Zoom, and so with confidence, right, I took something that I did not like, which I think Zoom is extremely impersonal. I think it's a bunch of floating heads that are just talking in terms of floating head. I'm not a really big fan of it, but I said, okay, well, what can this allow me to do? It can allow me to speak to people in the UK, in Australia, in India, and it can allow me to enter 2 different tournaments from 2 different places I ordinarily can be at the same time. And so I saw the positive aspects of it, which made me feel more confident about it and more engaged. And it turned something that I was very opposed to into something I saw as an opportunity. So even when she had reached out and said, it's okay if you want to do a Zoom. And I said, what kind of a hypocrite would I be if I told people, here's how you can communicate more effectively in person over a camera. So, yeah. Thank you for asking. It took an hour and a half. That answers your question, right? Okay, great, yes.
You can go first.
No, this is gonna take some time. You can go.
Go.
So like when you're writing up like a speech or something, do you look at this speech as a work of art or like something professional?
Great question. It depends on how politically correct I need to be. If there is a speech that I'm giving to people that are going to be in suits and ties, then I want to follow the basic formula of having a compelling introduction, having at least 3 reinforcing points, having a conclusion that summarizes all of that, brings us back to the beginning. And if the speech title, I want it to either be said or be present, scattered throughout it, so they realize it's thematic, because that shows organization. So if I present a speech in that manner, I'm going to make sure it follows that formula. No different than if you made a meal, and but they're lactose intolerant and gluten-free. Like there's different restrictions on what you're going to prepare versus someone who's just like, I'm just hungry, I'll eat whatever. Ooh, really, whatever? Great, because there's this other recipe, blah, 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 and I wanted to try this, blah, blah, blah. You'll eat it, right? I'm hungry. Okay, great, blah, blah. You see how I used a metaphor, right? Writing a speech is like preparing a meal. Some people are averse to certain things, some people are hungry for specific things, and some people are just like, I'll eat whatever you serve me. When it comes to the more spoken word format, it's much more free, it is much deeper. Like even in the presentation I gave you guys today, there were a few points that were extremely deeply introspective, but I didn't want to, again, diminish or devalue you because of your age. And I honestly believe this is a pivotal point in your life where you are as genuine and as authentic as you'll ever know yourself to be. She said it in my intro, and it's something I genuinely believe. The younger the audience, the greater the hope, because it's no different. A tree that you plant now only has so much time, but if you plant a seed early, those kind of messages will continue to echo and resonate and blossom into something amazing. Does that answer your question? Okay. Yes.
Okay, so piggybacking on what Shania said, she said something like, what are your overused impromptu or OO topics? So what are like underrated OO topics in your opinion?
As of recent, I've been talking about 2 different things. And speaking, what's your name? Right here. What's your name?
No,
Uh-huh.
Shanley.
Shanley? Okay. So Shanley, to the point that I expressed to you, coming up with something that you feel more confident speaking about. So I've made two very, very deep correlations as of late, and I've been using that far more often than I ever expected. One is that babies are one of the wisest beings on the planet, and another one is that seeing a homeless person is one of the most inspiring things I've ever experienced. Talking about those two things is something that I either use small examples within some presentations that I'm doing, or they are entire presentations on their own. One of which was 16 minutes, another one was 20. For instance, the homeless people you see, the sense of resilience, and that the resourcefulness, and the fact that a homeless person will make eye contact with hundreds of people in a day, and does away with their pride for the sake of sustenance. In other words, they're asking complete strangers for help. And there are many of us, children or adults, that could struggle immensely, intensely, and never even feel comfortable reaching out to a friend, a family member. It's very inspiring. See where I'm going with this? It's very inspiring for him or her to basically be that vulnerable and say, this is where I'm at, I want to get better. Can you, have no ties to me, provide any additional means for me to be free of this hunger? That's incredible. And as far as babies, I've been referencing them a lot as of late. I think they are the wisest. So I think you guys are smart. See, like, you know, I think that you're extremely wise, because a lot of what ends up happening over time is conditioning. It's taking everything that you feel and know to be true and telling you, yeah, but, you get older and older. The reason why I continue talking about babies for like the last year and a half, 2 years, is because like my sister, she just recently had a kid, my nieces had kids, and they cry. But the thing is, if you spend enough time around a child, the cry doesn't sound similar. You guys have little sisters, brothers, anything like that? Okay, so you would think one cry, but like there's a cry that says I'm lonely, there's a cry that says I'm hungry, and like you become more in tune to it. And one thing I've talked about recently about transparency and vulnerability is that babies do the one thing that as we get older, we're conditioned to be the last thing. They cry. So we're told to repress and to be silent and to not be more expressed. If you're crying, there must be something wrong, and yet we cry for joy, we cry for pain, and it's okay. So using that as a platform is what I call them, a platform to build on. And then again, I can make tons of different correlations to a child's willingness to talk to another child, and children don't know strangers. You have to teach them what a stranger is, but then like, do we really know what a stranger is? Because a vast majority of murders and home burglaries are from people you're related to. Anyway, that's a problem. But how much we can learn from just those two. Most people would not look at a crying baby on a plane or a homeless person who's trying to clean your windshield without you asking them as forms of inspiration. So the idea is for me to challenge myself and say, these are two very unconventional forms of wisdom, but if you delve deep enough into it, I mean, honestly, whether it's a person or a subject, if you spend enough time focusing on it, you know, people trapped in a room, trapped on an island, you're either gonna become horrible enemies or incredible friends. The more time and the more emotional and physical investment you place on anything, the deeper of a connection you're gonna build naturally. Does that answer your question?
One more.
Yes.
This kind of piggybacks off my like other topic I was talking about, and like the questions piggyback off of each other. But when I was asking like earlier, like to elaborate on
Sizing up your competition?
if you were to look at, because I was told from other people like, oh, look at someone's eyebrows, they would still feel intimidated, but like it also helps you. I don't know if you probably like experienced this, but would you think like if you were to tell someone that it would help them as well, or just like not really?
I think that when it comes to direct eye contact, I truly believe there's only two end results. One is an insurmountable feeling of discomfort, and especially understanding the competitive realm, they know that you're not trying to be their ally, or you do it for so long that what's happening without any actual verbal communication is that you're dissipating all the discomfort and you're getting it out of the way. It's like some of my closest friends, I don't hug them for like 2 seconds. I hug them. I hug them until, I'm not telling you to hug me better, but I hug them until it's okay, and then it's weird, and then they're like, I like this, and then you're like, all right, cool, well, now we're done. So when it comes to direct eye contact or really just being directly engaged, those 2 things are gonna happen. They're gonna squirm, or they're gonna get warm. And I think that it's extremely effective, especially because what you realize is right now, especially when it comes to that sort of atmosphere, you guys have the same goal. So even though you're enemies or competitors, in that moment, no one can relate better to what you're experiencing than them, right? They're on the opposite side of the stage, they're obligated, or they're looking at the pros or the cons, whatever. But at the same point, you're like, okay, well, I just want to assess the situation, and then either I feel good, you squirming has made me feel more confident, and I'm good now, or we both were just something weird happened, we're just all right, let's do this, let's have fun. By the way, in everything you're doing, I see this all the time, especially in the comedy world, enjoy it. Everywhere you go, you're with you all the time, right? So if you ever have to be something else to be someone's friend, if you have to portray someone else to get a job and it's not you and it's not authentic, it's not worth it. So the owner of the venue was praising me because she knew that none of those jokes were time tested, as we call it. And she's like, that was an amazing set. Everyone really loved it. They really did, I promise. And I said, you know what? Every one of my shows, there's always one person who always shows up. One person who's my most loyal audience member and my greatest critic. And I want to make sure they're happy because they're the same person, right? So you want to enjoy it. You want to be genuinely enthusiastic about what you're doing because it makes you charismatic, even if you think you're not. It makes you charming, even though you think you're not. And it's extremely contagious. If you ever see somebody really activated, that's what I call activated, you ever see somebody just really just loving, whether you, I'm sure you've seen people eating food, they're just oh my gosh, this is amazing, right? Or you've gone to movies with somebody and you're trying to talk to them and just they're gone. They're just, their eyes are glued to the screen. You see someone really, really enjoying what they're doing, what they're consuming, or where they are. They're a completely different person. They're them. They're the foundation of the template, the core of their being. I would say when it comes to confidence, comfort, keep recalibrating until you find out where that is and try and get back there as often and for as long as possible. I am engaged. If I could do this all day, every day, I'm living my dream. I'm talking to young people about what I feel is the most important asset in our society. I'm in my zone. So find a way to get back to it as quickly as possible and find a way to build a foundation so that you're able to be more stable in that moment, whatever it may be.